Constantly.
It leads to total chaos sometimes. Bottlenecks everywhere.
Exactly. Like imagine your website trying to talk directly to billing and inventory and shipping all at once every single time an order comes in.
Yeah, that's a recipe for things breaking. Slowdown's definitely some sleepless nights for the engineers.
Well, today we're going to dive into something that fixes exactly this mess, RabbitMQ.
Good topic.
Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. We're going to unpack how this open source message broker works, how it acts like a really smart middleman for applications.
Making things much more resilient, scalable, and, importantly, decoupled.
Right. Our mission here is basically to give you a shortcut, help you grasp the core ideas and, see how it works in the real world fast. And we're basing this on a really solid guide to RabbitMQ workflows. Lots of detail in there.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that initial problem, the shouting match you mentioned, it's that direct communication. It seems simple at first.
Right. It feels intuitive. Just call the other service.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in any kind of large system, it spirals out of control. You end up with this tight coupling.
Meaning everything depends on everything else.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Every service needs to know intimate details about the others. So if one little piece fails, boom, big ripple effect. And trying to scale it, that's a nightmare. It's like whack-a-mole.
Okay, so direct calls are out for complex systems. How does RabbitMQ step in? You said it enables asynchronous communication. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, think of it less like a direct phone call and more like a super organized post office for your applications.
A digital post office. Okay.
Yeah. RabbitMQ takes messages from producers as just anything sending data and routes them really efficiently to consumers. Anything processing that data, it does this using queues.
Queues, like waiting lines for messages.
Exactly. And this whole approach, it's fundamental for things like microservices or event-driven systems because it massively improves decoupling. Services don't need to be online at the same time. They don't even need to know the others exist.
That's a huge shift. Okay,
Right.
So let's trace that journey. What happens to a message step by step from sending to processing?
Right. So it all starts with the producer. That could be your web app when someone clicks buy or, any client sending data.
And it sends a message. Could be a task, an event, whatever.
Yep. But here's the key thing. The producer doesn't send it directly to a consumer. It sends it to the RabbitMQ broker. That's it. Like dropping a letter in a mailbox that's always there, always ready.
Okay, message sent. Dropped in the RabbitMQ mailbox. What's the first stop inside? Does it just wait?
Nope, not waiting yet. First, it hits an exchange instantly.
An exchange. And you said that's not for storage.
Correct. Think of the exchange as the sorting office, or maybe like an air traffic controller. It gets the message, looks at it, and its only job is to figure out where it needs to go next. Which queue or queues it should be routed to.
Based on rules.
Based on rules and the message's properties, yeah.
So how does it know the rules? How does it know where to send stuff?
That's where bindings come in. A binding is basically the connection, the link between an exchange and a queue.
Like setting up a forwarding address?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
It tells the exchange, hey, if a message looks like this or has this specific routing key, send it over to this queue. That routing key acts like a specific address or a filter instruction.
Got it. So exchange checks the bindings, finds a match based on the routing key, and routes the message. Where does it land then? Inside RabbitMQ.
It lands in the queue. That's the actual buffer, the waiting room, where messages sit tight until a consumer is ready for them.
Okay, the waiting room. Now, you mentioned reliability earlier. How do queues play into that?
This is critical. Queues can be set up as durable. A durable queue means it, and the messages in it, if they're also marked persistent, will survive if the RabbitMQ broker restarts. Like if the server crashes and comes back up.
Ah, so your messages aren't lost just because of a temporary outage.
Exactly. The alternative is a transient queue, which is temporary. It disappears on a restart. Fine for non-critical stuff, maybe, but not for orders or payments.
Makes sense. So durable queues are like a safe deposit box. Transient are more like a sticky note.
Good analogy. And yeah, for real safety, you want both the queue to be durable and the messages themselves to be marked as persistent when they're sent.
Okay, so double protection. How long do messages stay in this queue?
Usually until a consumer picks them up and says, yep, got it, processed it successfully. That's the acknowledgment part we'll get to. Or they might expire if you set a time to live, a TTL. Or if the queue gets totally full, though you usually want to avoid that.
Right. So the message is safe and sound in its durable queue. Who picks it up?
That's the job of the consumer. Any application or service that connects to RabbitMQ subscribes to a specific queue and says, I'm ready for messages.
And it just pulls messages off the queue.
Yep, it pulls them off and processes them asynchronously. And here's a big deal for scaling. You can have just one consumer pulling from a queue, or you can spin up 10 or 100 all working on the same queue.
Ah, so you can easily add more workers if the queue gets busy.
Precisely. That's horizontal scaling made easy.
Okay, this brings us to that handshake you mentioned, the reliability part. How does RabbitMQ know the consumer actually finished the job successfully? How do we avoid losing messages if a consumer crashes mid-process?
Right. This is acknowledgment, super central to RabbitMQ's promises.
Yeah.
You got two main ways this works.
Okay.
First is auto-acknowledgement. RabbitMQ just assumes success the moment it delivers the message. Sends it, forgets it.
That sounds risky.
It is. Generally, you don't want to use that for anything important, because if your consumer gets the message and then crashes before finishing, poof, message gone.
Okay, so what's the better way?
The much preferred way is explicit acknowledgement. The consumer does its work, processes the payment, updates the database, whatever, and only then does it send an ACK signal back to RabbitMQ saying, all good, I'm done with this one.
Ah, so RabbitMQ waits for that confirmation before it considers the message truly handled.
Exactly. That's the safety net.
So what if it doesn't get that ACK? Maybe the consumer crashed or there was an error processing. What happens to the message then?
Good question. If an ACK doesn't arrive, or the consumer explicitly rejects the message, RabbitMQ doesn't just delete it. It can requeue it, put it back in the queue, maybe at the front or back, for another consumer to try.
Okay, so it gets another chance, but what if a message keeps failing? Like, it has bad data or triggers a bug every time.
That's where dead letter queues, or DLQs, come in. They're lifesavers. You can configure RabbitMQ so that if a message fails processing too many times or gets rejected in a certain way, it gets moved automatically to a separate DLQ.
A queue for failed messages.
Exactly. This stops these poison messages from just cycling around forever and blocking up your main queue. You can then investigate the DLQ later, figure out what went wrong, maybe fix the data, and potentially reprocess them. It keeps the main flow healthy.
That's really clever. So you isolate the problems, and you mentioned publisher confirms too, briefly.
Yeah, that's another layer. Acknowledgments handle the consumer side. Publisher confirms handle the producer side. It's a way for the producer to get confirmation from RabbitMQ that the message was safely received and stored by the broker in the first place. It gives you true end-to-end confidence.
Wow. Okay. So the journey is quite robust. Now, you said earlier the exchange, the router, isn't just one type. There are different kinds.
Absolutely. And choosing the right exchange type is like a really fundamental design decision. It dictates how your messages get routed. There are four main ones.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, the direct exchange. Super simple. It routes messages to queues where the binding key exactly matches the message's routing key.
So routing key PDF.process. Binding key PDF.process. Direct hit.
Exactly. Perfect for sending a specific task to a specific worker, point to point.
Okay, simple enough. What's next?
Then you have the topic exchange. This one's much more flexible. It uses pattern matching on the routing keys.
Pattern matching, like wildcards.
Yep. An asterisk matches exactly one word in the key, and a hashtag, matches 0 or more words. Words are separated by dots.
Ah, okay, so I could send a message with routing key logs.us.error.
Right, and a queue bound with logs.us would get it, but so would a queue bound with logs, hashtag, or even .us.error. It lets consumers subscribe to very specific topics or broader categories. Really powerful for publish subscribe stuff.
I can see that, like filtering news feeds or something. Okay, third type.
The Fanout exchange. This one is the simplest, conceptually. It just ignores the routing key.
Ignores it. So where do messages go?
To every single queue that's bound to it. Just blasts the message out to all connected queues.
Like a broadcast.
It's exactly like a broadcast. Think system-wide announcements, cache and validation signals, things that everyone needs to know. If a queue is bound, it gets a copy. Simple as that.
Okay. Direct, topic, fan out. What's the last one?
The headers exchange. This one's a bit different. It doesn't use routing keys at all for routing.
No routing keys. How does it route them?
It looks at message headers, custom attributes, key value pairs that you can add to a message when you send it. The binding also specifies header key value pairs. The exchange then matches the message headers against the binding headers.
So like matching metadata instead of just a single string.
Precisely. You can set it to match if all the headers match or if any one of them matches.
Right.
It's less common maybe, but really useful for complex routing scenarios where a simple topic string isn't quite enough. Maybe you need to route based on message format and priority level, for example.
Wow, okay. That covers a lot of routing possibilities. Direct, topic, fan out, headers. So let's make this concrete. That e-commerce example, how would these pieces fit together?
Okay, perfect. So customer places an order on the website. The web app is our producer.
Right.
It creates an order.placed message, puts in all the order details, and crucially, it adds a routing key. So let's say based on the customer's location, it uses order.place.usa or maybe order.place.india.
Got it. Sends that one message to RabbitMQ. What kind of exchange would make sense here?
A topic exchange is a really good fit for this kind of event. Let's call it the orders exchange.
Okay. Order.place.india hits the orders exchange. Now what?
Now the bindings do their work. Imagine we have a billing service. It needs to process every order regardless of region.
Okay.
So we create QA for billing, and we bind it to the orders exchange with the binding key order.placed. The asterisk means it matches order.place.usa, order.place.india, anything that starts with order.placed.
Ah, so the billing service consumer listening to QA gets all the orders. Clever.
Exactly. But now, let's say we also have a specific dispatch center just for India. It only cares about Indian orders.
Right.
So we create QB. And we bind that one to the same orders exchange, but with the very specific binding key, order.placed.india.
So only messages with that exact key go to QB.
Precisely. So the web app sends one message. The topic exchange sees the routing key, order.placed.india. It checks its bindings. It matches order.placed. So it sends a copy to QA for billing. It also matches order.placed.india. So it sends another copy to QB for the India dispatch team.
Wow. The web app just fires and forgets, essentially. Sends one message. And RabbitMQ handles fanning it out or filtering it to all the different services that need it based on those bindings. Billing gets it, India dispatch gets it, maybe an inventory service gets it too, with another binding.
You got it. That is the power of decoupling right there. The web app has no idea, doesn't need to have any idea about the billing service or the dispatch service. They can be added, removed, changed, scaled independently. That's the core benefit.
It makes the whole system so much more flexible and resilient. You can handle spikes in orders because you can just scale up the consumers for the busy queues.
Exactly. If billing is slow, it doesn't slow down dispatch. They work independently off their own queues, processing that same initial event. It's elegant.
Okay, that really paints the picture. Now, beyond these core mechanics, what are some of the more advanced things people should be aware of, things that unlock even more power?
Well, one really practical thing, especially when you have lots of consumers, is prefetch count. It's often called QoS, quality of service.
Prefetch count, what's that do?
It's a setting on the consumer. It basically tells RabbitMQ, hey, don't send me more than, say, 10 messages at a time that I haven't acknowledged yet.
Ah, so it stops one consumer from grabbing hundreds of messages if it's slow to process them?
Exactly. It ensures a fair distribution of messages among multiple consumers working on the same queue. It prevents one slow worker from hoarding all the work while others sit idle. And it stops a fast producer overwhelming a slow consumer. Really important for balanced throughput.
Makes total sense for performance tuning. What about connecting different RabbitMQ setups, like across data centers?
Yeah, for that you have things like Shovel and Federation. These are ways to bridge RabbitMQ clusters or brokers that might be in different geographical regions or different networks.
So you can move the messages between them automatically.
Right. Shovel's more like a pump. It pulls messages from a queue in one place and pushes them to an exchange in another. Federation links exchanges or queues more dynamically, making them appear almost like one logical unit across brokers. They're key for building really large, globally distributed, resilient systems.
Okay, distributed systems. And can you add extra features to RabbitMQ itself?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Through plugins.
Yep.
RabbitMQ has a pretty active plugin ecosystem.
Like what kind of plugins are common?
Probably the most widely used is the management plugin. It gives you that nice web UI where you can see all your queues, exchanges, connections, message rates. Really invaluable for monitoring and, well, managing the broker.
I've seen screenshots of that, yeah. Very useful.
Definitely. Then there are plugins for protocols, like the MQTT plugin, which lets RabbitMQ talk to IoT devices using the MQTT protocol, which is huge for Internet of Things applications.
So it's not just limited to its native protocol.
Not at all. And another interesting one is the delayed messages plugin. The core AMQP protocol doesn't actually have a native concept of scheduled or delayed delivery.
Really? So how does that work?
This plugin provides that capability. It lets you publish a message but tell RabbitMQ, don't actually deliver this to the queue for another, say, 24 hours. Super useful for things like sending reminder emails or scheduling follow-up tasks without needing a separate scheduling system.
That's surprisingly handy. Okay, so we've covered a lot. Bringing it all together, if someone's listening, thinking about designing a system, why should RabbitMQ be high on their list? What are those key takeaways?
I'd say number one is that asynchronous decoupling. It's huge. Producers and consumers are independent. They don't need to be online together. They don't need to know about each other. That flexibility is transformative.
Right. Independence.
Second, scalability. You can scale consumers horizontally just by adding more instances. You can scale producers. RabbitMQ itself can be clustered. It's built for growth.
And the reliability seems rock solid.
Definitely. Reliability. You've got message persistence, those acknowledgments we talked about, publisher confirms, dead letter queues. It's a whole suite of features designed to make sure messages don't get lost, even when things go wrong.
Peace of mind for critical data.
For sure. Then there's the routing flexibility. With the different exchange types, direct, topic, Fanout, headers, and the binding rules, you have immense control over how messages flow through your system.
Tailor exactly to your needs.
Yep. And finally, while its core is AMQP, its support for protocols. Multiple protocols through plugins like MQTT, Stomp, WebSockets makes it really versatile. It can talk to lots of different kinds of clients and systems.
It really does sound like a fundamental piece of the puzzle for modern systems. This whole deep dive, it kind of changes how you think about connecting things, doesn't it?
It really does.
Moving away from those rigid point-to-point connections and more towards these flexible, resilient rivers of information. It makes you think differently about how data should flow.
Absolutely. Once you grasp message queuing, and RabbitMQ specifically, it really unlocks a different way of architecting systems. It opens doors to building things that are way more robust, scalable, and easier to manage in the long run. It might even spark ideas for how information could flow better in projects you're already working on. It's about designing for change and resilience right from the start.